We have Mike Rowland anymore?
Huh?
Mike's not on this computer.
No, he's not on the committee, but he's, well, this is open to the public, so we are recording now. So yeah, the meeting is open to the public. Dick Kufal, actually, he was going to either come in or call in also. It's a public meeting, anybody can attend, anybody can make comments. And, but we basically have the 4 people. So-
That committee, Mike Rowland, you mean Mike Wiggins?
Okay, that's my mistake. Because it should be Mike Wiggins. I apologize for that.
Fix it. All his own. Nice. Yeah, they're $1,000, he said. Wow.
All right, I will get this changed and we'll do that. I apologize for that. Too many mics. So this meeting, the first thing on the agenda is to basically call to order, and we don't have a chair, so I'm just gonna assume I don't think I have any coffee. Okay. I'll just call the meeting to order because we do have a quorum. And I think Ron is on the phone in New York, so if you want to introduce yourself and just tell them what your position is. Go ahead, Ron.
My name's Ron Stender. I'm on the Board of Supervisors for Ashland County.
Okay.
Sandor? So is it Ron Sandor?
Yeah, Steindorf.
Sandor?
Steindorf, yep.
Mike Wiggins Jr., federal chairman through the Battle of Band, Mr. Chippewa, and happy to be here.
Ron, can you hear Mike Wiggins?
Barely, if he could speak up a little.
That's no. We're just gonna move the mic. I got a microphone right there. This is the first time we're using our mixer, by the way. So I'm just testing out. We'll just give a test 1, 2, 3.
Testing. 1, 2, 3. Testing. How's that, Ron?
Good.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Jay?
My name is Jay McPhee. I'm Tribal Council Secretary.
I'm Pat Kenny, County Board of Supervisors.
Can you hear everybody okay, Ron?
Yes.
Thank you.
So there's 2 Pat Kenny's then.
Yeah.
I was thought it was the other Pat. Nice to meet
There's
you.
a lot more in my family exchange.
Actually, I think Pat, since there's a good table here, and we're trying to wear a mask here. I'm just going to go there. Okay, we got microphone. Why don't you have everybody microphone?
So Ron Clark just moved the mic closer to me. Does that sound any different?
Okay. All right. So the first thing we're going to do is elect a chair, and I think because we just have 4 members on this committee, you know, I think it's an affirmative vote would be 3 votes. 2 would be a tie. So we can take nominations for election of chair.
Could I ask you as far as number 2, you have approval of amendment? Do you want to come back to that or skip?
Oh, you're right. Good point. Approval of the agenda. I need a motion to approve the agenda.
Ron approves agenda.
Okay.
Motion.
Second? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All right, agenda approved. The election of the chairs, taking nominations for election of the chairs.
Is there anybody who wants to give a campaign speech?
That's a good question. Is there anybody who wants to be the chair?
I was gonna suggest that either Dave or Mike serve as chair, because I think a lot of the communication outside of meetings is gonna go between, that river representation and the administrator. And if the intent is to work on issues of communication, it would seem that the person outside of the meeting serving as chair to talk to the administrator, me, it seems like we able to better address issues by having someone from Bad River serve as chair.
Is that a nomination? You have to pick one.
If either of you are happy to be chair, I would have to nominate either.
Yeah, I could do that.
I'll nominate Mike Wiggins to serve as chair.
Okay, is there a second nomination?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Any other nominations? All right, all those in favor of Mike Wiggins being chair of this committee signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carries. Vice chair. Nominations for vice chair.
Nominate Pat Kenny.
Pat Kinney has been nominated for vice chair. Are there any other nominations for vice chair? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. All right, so I got Mike W. and Pat K. All right, with that then, item number 5, goals, expectations, outcomes, and scope of the group. Chairman Wiggins, you can lead this discussion, and I would certainly be willing to interject.
All right. Well, maybe I'll start by, I'll ask you, Clark, to summarize our meeting in Bayfield County, and then maybe a little bit of what your understanding is out of that committee that is our mirror between Bayfield and Red Cliff.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So the Bayfield County had started this same type of County Tribal Relations Committee in 2017. They had a couple meetings in 17, 4 meetings in 18, 2 meetings in 19. They haven't met this year. So it's not to say that a committee like this is forever. I think it's one of those things, if we don't have a need to meet, we don't need to spend the money to meet. And so when we talked about the meeting that Chairman Wiggins is talking about, during the George Floyd riot issues, we felt it was important. I was talking with Chairman Pufall of the County Board of Ashland to discuss that, you know, if we have a bad traffic accident, if we have a protest out here, I think it's good for basically our tribal partners and our county partners to be able to talk to each other, to be able to call each other and say, hey, what's the messaging? How do we de-escalate situations? And as a preventative measure, what steps need to be taken to look at how do we not get there in the first place, which is even the more important issue. You know, I mean, it's one thing to have an issue and all of a sudden have to de-escalate it. It's another issue to say, why did we get here and how can we limit the possible negative outcomes from either policies or procedures that we deal with in our relationships between the county and the tribe. We also talked about at that meeting, you know, what are some of the sticking points that basically preclude or limit good working relationships or as positive relationships as we can between the county and the tribe. One of the things that Chairman Wiggins had brought up was the Jason Pearl shooting, and the question of, you know, has the county ever addressed that? We discussed the Department of Justice finding, the district attorney finding a non-chargeable offense, but you know, I think from a standpoint, one of the things that meeting we had up in Bayfield County was maybe we need to develop a committee that would provide a listening session for the community to hear and discuss this issue. And I think that's one of the outcomes that maybe this committee would facilitate, is being the group that will provide a listening session and then a summary of the community's thoughts of that particular issue. There are numerous other issues which this committee could be involved in. We do have, for your own information, there is a committee called the Public Property and Law Enforcement Committee, and Laura Negro is the chair of that committee. So the one thing we definitely don't want to do is we don't want to duplicate efforts. So we want to make sure that, you know, Chairman Wiggins would work with Chairperson, I just want to make sure no one's else here, Chairperson Negro, to make sure that we're not doubling up on issues, because they may also look at law enforcement policy and procedures and other things. So we want to make sure we're kind of addressing it. So in my mind, you know, I think we need to define, do we want to develop a committee that brings in reports, you know, from, you know, let's say domestic violence, drug court, criminal justice coordinator positions, health and human services, child welfare, law enforcement. You know, do we want to have a committee that works on the issues so that this committee can hear, you know, from leaders from the tribal community to say, here are concerns that we have, and you can make, this group would make a recommendation to either another committee or the county board concerning how we deal with issues. So that's my idea. And I just trying something new. And if it doesn't work, you know, at least we tried something new. And so I kind of want to hear what your thoughts and expectations would be. How would you like to see these meetings run? Because obviously we don't have anything to discuss besides our goals, our outcomes, and scope. And before we have another meeting, then I would produce whatever you guys are interested in hearing, or whatever you're interested in learning more about, so we can, you know, look at issues within our relationship.
So my thought on some of what you shared, Clark, is that one of the reasons we're coming together like this is because of the uniqueness of the tribal county relationship, and maybe the uniqueness of the reciprocity of in-person sharing, and then the reciprocity of however we choose to interact with the public too, you know, inviting members to maybe speak during one of our future meetings on a particular subject or what. And so there's a part of me that says, there's a part of me that takes the thought that I'm not too worried about duplication in a sense, because I'd like to reserve that uniqueness as something that is worth doing and is authentic in and of itself. That uniqueness of the fact that we're bringing direct kind of consultation into a mechanized format, I guess you'd say, right? You know, and how we do this. And so, law enforcement, I think, is a discussion. There's a huge litany of concerns in the law enforcement realm. You know, this is my personal opinion. You know, the murder of Jason is one of them, and so talking about that and giving ourselves free space to talk about issues is going to be important. And what comes out of that, whether that's this committee taking an autonomous kind of proactive approach to something, or this committee interacting with another chairman on another committee in order to kind of synergize and be efficient. Whatever comes out of that, I mean, we can negotiate that and cross that bridge when we arrive, you know. But I think some of the uniqueness might be in that sense of giving access to folks from our communities, you know, a chance to kind of talk about different issues that we choose to highlight, you know. So, and I know those portals of access are there, in all the communities and all the stuff that you do, and showed us the YouTube channel. But you know, this can take on a little bit more of a subjective, and maybe even for my purposes, a subjective tribal kind of slant in terms of an access, and maybe providing some comfort and I think I'm looking for another word besides comfort, but I guess that comfort and security level.
Reassurance.
Yeah, that reassurance that they're safe and that they can communicate, you know. And of course that works on both sides of the coin. So in terms of people from all our communities. Yeah, so as far as you know, when I think of goals and expected outcomes, it's to just highlight issues that could use some work. Maybe we take on some efforts that have a life unto themselves with our committee. Maybe we dovetail into other committees that are already working on issues in play. I think we give ourselves a little bit of freedom and a little bit of spontaneity in terms of how we roll, reacting as we encounter stuff. Keeping the lines of communication and a safe space to talk, keeping that safe space as open as possible too, so that we don't tread too lightly and end up missing the grist of some of the communications that have to take place.
Okay, thank you. Pat.
The topics you raised all make sense to me. One of the early questions I had has to do with process. And I'm thinking of my time as council president, the city council, and at times I wanted to get information from various department heads, et cetera, to prepare agenda plans. And one of the issues I ran into, depending on who the department heads were, who the mayor was, who the city administrator was just simply getting information to prepare for meetings and agenda items. Sometimes I got lots of cooperation, other times I got absolutely no cooperation, and that made it hard to do what I was supposed to be able to do in terms of serving the council, bringing issues forward. So, pondering what Mike was saying, and then thinking about actually implementing this, I guess maybe the simplest way of doing that off the top of my head is for Clark as county administrator and Mike as chair of Bad River, is just to make sure that your committees and staff know that when information is asked for and for preparation for meetings, that it's expected that there be a reasonable level of cooperation. And I say reasonable there because, you know, suppose one of us asks for some information and staff will, oh my God, it's going to take 50 hours to pull that together. Or it's going to cost us this much in staff time and whatever to get that. So, you know, if it's not a reasonable, and you as administrator make sure of that river, you know, can make that determination. I think for this to work in the way that Mike was talking about, I think the elected officials and those that work for these organizations would have to be clear to them that we're looking for cooperation with their perspective. Because people over time on committees and elected boards have to come and go. And if we don't have bylaws and stuff in writing, then you start running into bottlenecks and headaches. So I'll let you ponder the administrator thing with Mike, but it just doesn't try to do our work. We don't get stonewalled for whatever reason somewhere, including if it's an employee or a committee member that just says, hey, it's not my job description, and I don't think I should deliver this information out. Just for whatever reason, so we can actually function and do the work along the lines of Mike was talking about.
Okay. All right, Jay.
Well, I'm kind of confused about the whole issue because I was wondering why this has been in place for many years. You know, Modena and Ashland have always needed some type of resource that they could depend on. And there's nothing there, because everything that we do, when it comes to, as far as Odana is concerned, all the kids are here every day. And that's where I think one of our biggest problems is that we're not able to, give them what they need when it comes to information, just whatever they want to do, these kids seem like they want to come, that this is where they want to be, because there's more, socializing here, there's more things to do here than what Dana has. Then I've noticed lately, well, there's a lot of kids from Ashland that want to go to the Dana too. And it's like, wow, it's about time, this is nice, to see, that at least, because this is where I think our main problem is just with the kids, because, we learn from the kids. That's where they, everything that they do, they learn it here in Ashland, because that's where they go to school, So I think it's really important that, that's kind of like one of the I think should be one of the main focuses, making sure our kids are understood and happy and not disrespected when they come to town, and the same with Ashland kids when they go to Odana. There's got to be safeguards for everything. It's really changed a lot, from what I could see, but the changes are not good. A lot of the changes that are not good. I remember when I was a kid, we always were in town. We would hitchhike home there all hours of the night, and we never had a problem with that. As being kids, of course, our parents didn't. But we always did it. The parents, for as long as you got home and you were going to school the next day, everything was fine. But I think there's got to be something there. Because my mom, Dana, being a tribal member, she never had anybody like a place where she could call in town, or anything, it was just, you're on your own, So I think it's really important that we do something, because when it comes to relations, that's where it starts, with our kids, it's really important, because if the kids are happy, parents are happy, that's, then it can build from there, but until then, I think that's the base that is the kids.
I can tell you from having taught at WITC, the BART system is an important connection for transportation for people between Bad River and here. That's not just for students, but I hear them talking about, from Bad River, and we'll talk about, my kids are going back and forth, maybe by the BART bus. So the BART schedule and frequency and where they drop off is an important issue as far as people back and forth. So I don't know if that could be improved on where it's at, but if you wanted an issue for future meetings, looking at where BART picks up and drops off and frequency, including how late at night. Sometimes the last BART bus, my understanding is, they're stopped before everybody gets back. Then right at the hitchhiking or calling somebody, to get a ride.
Okay, Ron, what do you think we should focus on, or what do you think the outcome should be of this committee?
I think we need to focus on any information that we get and that we can give out. We give out as quick as possible, because after reading the Piro report, brought a lot of things to light that people didn't know. And when we have these meetings, we should discern whether we can get this information out or not, and it cut down on a lot of the rumors, animosity, etc., which I think could really help our whole position.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a little bit of a quick ticker list to thinking about today, and I'm just putting them out there for food for thought in terms of issues to swing in on and look at in the future. And I made a couple of notes. I mean, I like that notion of BART, and in terms of, are there things that could be done better? We have a really healthy relationship with BART, with our travel transit. There's a lot of reciprocity and cost sharing and things that go on there. We can get into that stuff later. I think Jay's point about youth outreach and youth services and or support for kids in our communities. And under that umbrella, there could be efforts to facilitate dialogue or communication or education. Take that as far as you want to go. I think that was good too. Other ticker list items, I know because I've been trying to help them. We have tribal members living on the lake shore down here in Ashland that are experiencing homelessness. During one of the last huge thunderstorms, there were about 9 people, some tribal members and some non-tribal, all huddled up underneath the Purple Park Pavilion, right in the center of Ashland over here, between Quick Trip and Schwamigan Clinic. I know it's the city of Ashland, but the county, as the transcending kind of home that I see, I see it as Ashland, locked down in Ashland County. I think in general, highlighting and shining a light on those issues and just having dialogue about what could be done, or again, take it as far as you want to go, all of the things that we can talk about with that issue. I think that'd be a good thing. I don't know if I don't see too much attention and priority being placed on that. So I mentioned, and I think attention and priority, if our committee chose to talk about some of that at a county level, which would include Ashland and Raspberry, obviously, I don't think that's a bad thing, because this North Country is a place to try to weather unintended homelessness. And the last thing I'll say about the homelessness topic is that I read a definition a couple weeks ago, and I don't know why, but it really stunned me, and finally it hit harder than it ever has. And it said homelessness is defined as the lack of reliable shelter, and that's such a humble, primal kind of thing. It just kind of stunned me. And so after reading that and letting that sink in, we have some efforts going on the res to address homelessness. But when that big storm hit, and I thought, I'm going to check it out, because I had heard the Purple Park is a hangout for homelessness in Ashland. They actually had a fire going right at the edge of the pavilion, because it was kind of cold, and that storm was really driving rain and wind, they were all soaking wet. And seeing all of them, diverse groups, seeing that diverse group of people huddling under that pavilion was heartbreaking, and it really was. And so there they were, right in the center of Ashland, right? Because I was in my nice warm truck and was ready to drive to the house, They stayed there. And so homelessness as a part of my ticker list, I mentioned law enforcement. The Jason Puro issue, it might be that we have to acknowledge we'll never come to see, we'll never get to see that through the same lens. Obviously, with the DA's position and with the historical fact of where we are at right now since it happened, I don't see it the same way that the system did. And so could acknowledge that. At the same time, I saw an effort just being discussed on social media about a Jason Puro memorial, And we have an area right there in Odena that would lend itself to that. We removed the water tower, so there's this empty footprint, which is about a few hundred feet, maybe 200 feet from where Jason was killed on the road, you know. And so I'd like to reinvigorate that discussion came and it kind of went, but as an administrator, I've been looking to reinvigorate some life into that discussion, maybe do something. And that memorial could be a time for acknowledgement. It could be a time for, it could be a time for a mechanism for healing, in the sense that we have to also acknowledge that for some in our community that will never heal, just like you never stop missing your mother or you know, but well, for any loved one that journeys, you know, that's just the way it is. And life goes on with that thing, you know, out there. Okay, so moving on to the ticker list, Enbridge is a huge issue. We're going to gear up and battle them up in the watershed. They plan on blasting their way essentially from the Bad River bedrock, all the way, blasting their way all the way through waterways up along Potato River 169. Our position is going to be, we don't think so. And so we're in active litigation with them right now on the res. And so that effort is going to continue up there. And there's some things to think about, because when they plan on blasting into the bedrock or underneath the Bad River, they're in groundwater aquifers. And people don't want to talk about that kind of stuff. There is no science yet that is being applied to any of this. It's all the Enbridge machine greasing public opinion. And so, you know, we can follow the science, we can follow the law, but we need science. And this gets back to the mining issue to me, where, you know, because of lack of resources, you're going to let the mining company drive the science, because there is alternative facts and there is alternative global science. And so right now with Enbridge, that's the same way. That effort is underway. So I'm just going to tell you, I want to talk about Enbridge, and when the time comes, we need to talk about specifics. We need to look at specific waterways and stuff, and make sure there's integrity of process on both sides of the coin.
You know, I couldn't agree with you more, because I think one of the things that, you know, if Enbridge does go through, this might be next summer, it might be the summer after that, frankly. I think part of it is based on frankly, I think part of it's going to be based on the presidential election. I think if there's a continued Republican administration, you'll probably see a more of an accelerated plan for approvals from the state level. You know, they'll pressure the state, obviously the DNR and other things like that. And you may see support for reviewing the process more with the Democratic administration. But I think one of the things that I'd really want to have this group focus on is if this does happen next summer and we have water protectors coming, you know, what is the response, you know, from the county and also from the tribe concerning, you know, where people reside, where they protest, sanitation issues, security issues, all those things would have to be addressed ahead of time if we anticipate that we're going to have, you know, water protectors in mass, you know, doing things. We have to think about the outcomes. If we don't think about the outcomes ahead of time, we're just going to be responding to action. And if we know ahead of time, I think it would be good for us to talk about that.
Yeah, right. And there's a whole solar system of topics underneath the Enbridge umbrella, sure. And so I'm just going to rehash ticker list and then move forward. youth outreach, the homelessness, law enforcement, Jason Drew Memorial, Enbridge. And then one thing that I'd like to talk about, and maybe we synergize with other chairs and other committees, but the Kakagan Sloughs, we worked with the town of
The what?
The Kakagan Sloughs.
Okay,
We
What's
worked with the town of Sanborn on a no-wake ordinance. Not being an attorney, I don't know where the legalities and the jurisdictions intersect, but if there's anything that we can do on a partnership, in a partnership effort or a collaborative effort between the tribe and the county, I'd like to highlight SLU's ordinances that are aimed at protection and preservation of our wild rice beds. And without getting too far into it, as one example, I'll give you two quick examples. One is there's a period of time in May into June where it's at what's called a floating leaf stage. The wild rice comes up. When it hits the surface, it doesn't sprout up into the air. It actually bends and it rises to the surface for quite a while, weeks, until it finally stands up. When it's in the floating leaf stage and it's bent on the top of the surface, large boat waves can actually pull that root right out of the bog, you know? And so,
makes sense.
so we struggle with some of the massive boats that rip through there at that time of year. Our response has been to create no-wake ordinances. We're working with the town to get some enforcement teeth on non-tribal boats, big boats. As one example, you know, and that's, so our no-wake ordinance is temporary. As soon as that rice stands up, it can withstand, you know, the wakes that are thrown. But looking at some of that kind of stuff, the other example I'll just give you.
You'll have to send me an email on that because I don't know anything about it.
All right.
Okay.
It's real. I mean, I'm not a gardener, a very good gardener, but it's a real simple concept too. It's just that big boats, big boaters.
Yeah.
At certain times in the spring, at late early summer, destroy rice.
Yeah.
The other one is that when that rice comes out of the bog in the early spring, it's underwater growing to the surface. Heavy nutrient loading that decreases oxygen can destroy all kinds of aquatics. And that brings me forward to my next issue, which is, and again, this is just shining a positive light to try to get to priority. We need to talk about Ashland sewage. I really thought that Ashland and Ashland County missed an opportunity to get $24 million out of Enbridge for all of the things that you gave away for nothing. To get that money from Enbridge to replace the whole sewer system up here and redo the entire infrastructure, sewage infrastructure issue that's going on for the city of Ashland right now. That might not be completely lost, but you know, no one's talking about stuff like that. Every massive rain event, there's what, 8 to 10 million gallons of raw sewage going into the bay. In the springtime, with flooding and rain and weather events that increase, that nutrient loading is most likely devastating wild rice crops. And so I'm working with the Burke Center in talks with them, asking them, and we're talking about potential collaborative projects to start studying the science on the sewage issue as it impacts the wetland areas around us. But for every action, there's a reaction, and no one's tracking what probably the hundreds of thousands of gallons of raw sewage that's getting dumped in that bay. We track it with beach closings and algae removal, you know, so we can do better. And along those lines, getting into discussions about CAFOs, I think proactively in a time of non-crisis, which I would define as right now, now is the time to talk CAFO before a situation like Reich's CAFO with the 20-some thousand pigs that were supposed to be in the headwaters of Fish Creek. Before that situation arrived right over here on White River by Deer Creek Sea, or before Jim Peck with his current CAFO decides to quadruple operations, because we're already seeing the increased nutrient loading coming off the Peck's farm in the Marengo area. What we have is we have a whole litany of beautiful farms that are choosing and struggling to stay underneath CAFO status. And one of the things we can do there, I think, with proactive attention and discussion is, number one, we can try to protect Ashland County from the arrival and onslaught of CAFOs. Number two, we can try to invigorate and promote and push those kinds of mechanisms in our county and the tribe that keep all of these small farms alive. I don't think people know about Harvey. I don't think that a lot of people understand what CSAs are and all those options. What's really interesting is the pandemic is driving all of those things. Community supported agriculture. You pay a little bit of money ahead of time, and the farms deliver fresh food right off the gardens, right to your door. So you're working directly with Todd Roby, Chris Duke, and Bear Track Creek Farms and all that. And you get your box of stuff right from the farm, you know, as an alternative to going to Walmart. And price is the issue and all of that stuff, but just talking about those kinds of things, because those small farms are that protective layer that prevent those big CAFOs from dropping in. And I can tell you, I've been to Green Bay. I went to a rummage sale in this neighborhood where the average house was probably $600,000. I got out of my car on this pure white, looked like limestone driveway, great big shiny house, and the pungent, putrid smell of livestock manure almost knocked me out. And I thought to myself, these poor people, because all around that that development of all those big fancy houses was just, as far as the eye could see, fields, and they were spraying manure, you know. And so those people live in CAFO land. And when I stood there, I could understand why you don't see the state rising up when something like this is going on up here. We try to protect ourselves. Their attitude is probably, oh, why are they special? We got to live in it. And I'm telling you, so we got to look out for ourselves on that stuff. Not to mention that there's a high percentage of private wells that are full of E. coli and fecal matter down in Kewaunee County and some of the CAFO counties down there. People are literally drinking livestock manure, and hey, we don't have to get into that stuff. And well, there's a price to pay for all of that. So we talked about BART, and then the last one would require, and Jay, I want to be clear on this. The last one would require a tribal referendum at some point before anything could ever happen. But I think we need to talk about the possibility of what it would take to create a manageable ATV snowmobile corridor from Ashland to Urbana. I think there's a lot of win-wins in that. If our kids, if our tribal people pass that on a referendum, we have an old referendum from the 90s that is still in play that where our people voted down a trail that went all the way through from Iron County to Ashland County. I think if done properly with the tribe being controlled jurisdictionally and having enforcement so that we can keep people on that trail, there's a possibility that people might allow it for quality of life enhancement and also for economic development, with the idea that, of course, that would run right through the casino parking lot, Oxen Trail parking lot, as it connects into what is a spur called the Northern Lights Snowmobile Trail that runs from the casino to Iron County. There's tens of thousands of miles and of trails that are broken by the lack of connectivity through the Bad River Res. And so that's something that we could discuss proactively, but I wouldn't put as a placeholder that a trail would have to go through a referendum process on this.
And, this is JP, and, there's a lot of people that still protest the trail. You know, there was, you know, we voted on it, did protest it. And it was, you know, because of all the things that come with that. You know, I mean, you got people, look at all the deaths you have every year, people on four-wheelers and snowmobiles. Plus with all the other things that are happening now, with kids missing, you know, I mean, what an excellent way to transport drugs, you know. It's just, you know, way out of our scope as far as someone to enforce it. It's really impossible almost to enforce it. Because you got so many offshoots on the trail. Just because you have one trail doesn't mean you have 100 other trails. You know, and that's what, you know, a lot of people protested for when it was protested in the 90s. And for it to come back up on referendum would probably be probably this next election in November. I just, I myself, being a tribal member too, I don't see it as something that, as a matter of fact, that I would like to see. But, you know, you'd have to work with people that if they want it, they want it. I don't see it as something that is really something that, you know, it's like, as far as like making money out of it. You don't make money out of people that are just going to drive through your reservation and use your trail for whatever they can. Because, I mean, it's happening now. Blackbeard's there and in Flambeau, you know, they both people on reservations. It decreases land value, you know, because these people don't sleep on snowmobiles and four-wheelers. They're up all the time. So if you have a house close to there, you know, that's, you know, you never get to sleep.
Yeah, so that'll be something we can put on the agenda. I just will say on the ATV corridor, we are at the county board meeting coming up on, that's coming up on the 8th. We are going to be adopting a updated ordinance for county road ATV use. And so we have a policy. I mean, we've had a policy and we've had an ordinance. And, you know, one of the things is we get at the county level is we get a lot of requests from, you know, townships or other people saying, hey, we want to open up this road. And so the highway committee has been working through the process of, you know, what are the metrics that you need to be able to meet to have a road that has ATV accessibility, conductivity, and, you know, signage and all those different things. And what is the process that we go through as a county when we get petitions to do that? Now, the townships obviously can, you know, townships can make up their own rules concerning ATV corridors on township roads. But that is coming up. I don't know if this would affect this issue at all. So yeah, so I have, you know, future agenda items, you know, going forward, you know, would be, you know, CAFO, which again, I've been here about a year, so I'd have to get up to date on that. But in this case, when you look at, you know, me as administrator, you shouldn't look upon me as being an expert in every department that I run in the county. But we do have people who, you know, land conservation who would be working, who have worked and have studied that. They could come in and start a discussion on that. The sewage issue, land conservation is also working on that. Mary Jo Gingras is on the working group with the city along with DNR and some other people studying that issue. So it'd be good to get that report out there, because you're right, it's unacceptable that we get 7 million gallons of diluted sewage running into the greatest body of water on the planet. That's just totally crazy.
And I would change your paradigm just here. When you're out on Long Point, which is the tip of Long Island, you're only about a mile across to the Bayfield Peninsula. If you follow the science, Schwamigan Bay, as essentially a shallow, flat bottom, sandy bay, is almost, and these are hydrologists that would characterize it as almost a standalone inland lake. It is hydrologically almost cut off from the big lake, enough so that it is a little bit of a water body unto itself.
So there's not a lot of water exchange when we're on the west side of Long Island.
So your sewage is hitting these estuaries hard.
Yeah.
They're going up in the Fish Creek, they're going, and wetlands are doing what they're supposed to do. They clean up everything, right? But at the same time, they probably, in their life, also, we see things as animate. In the life of Kakagan and Fish Creek wetlands, I don't think they've ever seen this magnitude of sewage pouring into Schwaben Bay. So we always think of the big lake can take it. I think the big lake, Schwaben Bay, is almost standalone. And so, again, we measure the closed beaches, blame geese, and it ain't geese. I mean, the migratory bird flyways that used to block out the sun here, those ain't no more. It ain't geese nowadays. And closed beaches and algae blooms. Where I see the algae up in California, we don't want that stuff here in the Bay. It's going to get bad.
The other thing related to the Bay is this lawn chemicals. I read a study years ago that nationwide there's more nutrients that go into water from people having their lawns treated so they're green and pesticides than actually from farming. So we should add that to the list to see if we can somehow get people to be more responsible about. It's come along all of them when they come out. Lawns are green, but a lot of that stuff washes into the woods.
The gallons, the gallons of storage that Walmart pull around them is stunning. And there's turnover there, through the early part of the summer, the turnover in the groundwater shelves is unreal. It's all into the water. As one edge of the water, I don't want to get lost in the magnitude of all of that, but I think proactively pushing some of these cities and also the city, because studying, I always remember a friend of mine, Jay is a guy local. He's talking about Bad River Natural Resource Department. He's 50 years old. Study this, study that, study this, study that, whatever comes to mind. And I knew exactly what he was talking about. It's paralysis by analysis. And right now, I'd love to be able to have you guys point out the area in the city that's having its sewage infrastructure redone. It's not happening because it's not a priority. And life goes on. Always going to need a new cop shop. Always going to need a new building over here. All the city's going to always need to beautify the lakefront and develop ORDA. If you don't prioritize and at least start the process, then it's never going to happen. And that's kind of so far. I remember a year and a half ago, the mayor talking about we're forming a committee, we're going to start looking at this and get after it. Nothing's happened.
I think that committee is meeting because one of my staff was asked to attend that meeting.
I don't want to, I'm not saying that, I don't want to sound like I'm saying that disrespectfully.
Yeah.
I'm just, when we talk about outcomes, then we're talking about action.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Talk is cheap.
Right. Sometimes, yeah.
We all, both Ashland and Odina, talking about the charter elements, we deal with chlorine a lot, and chlorine is on the very top, of charter elements, because it takes care of everything. It cleans, and that's like, when I was a kid, you could sit over there on the bay, and you could see plants growing out there. You could see things growing in the bay right here, and the same was up in Odina. You could actually see little clumps of, cattails and stuff. Well, I don't, you don't see that anymore because the chlorine everywhere. It's coming from both sides. Like our sewer system runs right into the Bad River. It's dumping chlorine in there, and, Ashland. So we're kind of getting, on both sides too. It's kind of, we gotta look at that. Chlorine, that's what they get over at Water Sewer, they get, 100 gallons of chlorine every month. And that stuff doesn't go away, it never dies, When you can walk through the grass where it used to be, see it kicking up, and it blows through the air, and it hurts kids, it hurts elders, it's terrible stuff, I mean, it's good in one way, but, there's gotta be I think you gotta work with it, I guess. Figure something out with all that, without chlorine use. That's if it's tough, everybody said, well, we need it to clean, it's for cleanliness. And that's all you're drinking is chlorine.
Regarding the chlorine, Kate was a few years ago, I asked the public works director to meeting about the use of chlorine in the table. But kind of a long story short, if we do things to reduce the need for chlorine, then there will be less chlorine used. A lot of issues with plant drainage, if we do that with a mold, it'll result in less chlorine being used in consequences. And they did put in that people, they estimated not only would they be treating more water, but that's how much more chlorine is used to all enough to kill bacteria. Pretty big number in terms of amount of chlorine and cost. The bigger issue is the people when it increased filling, and that's limitations in the baby, which would increase the cost of filters to filter out the sediment in the tank. So, occasionally we don't think about the cost of operating a water treatment plant, maybe not the first thing to think about, but it would drive up those costs too. So maybe some economic benefit analysis of all of the issues that might raise people understood the economic benefits, maybe we get more people on board to support them. Because that's part of what they're talking about is those economic benefits that not everybody thinks about, because part of it is it's not analyzed.
Yeah, right, and that's usually what gets the headlines, the economic analysis. A lot of the stuff that we push has such a subtle, humble quality of life enhancer to it. Your kids swimming in just clear, beautiful, clean water, rather than clear water that's filled with E. coli, A lot of times, when those beaches close, you can't tell by looking at that, you know what I mean? And so it's just a quality of life enhancer, right?
Well, my brother and his two girls, 9 and 12, came up with their Madison about a month ago. They wanted to go swimming in Lake Superior. They went out to Fair Park. They couldn't believe how bad it was. So they said, we'll never go swimming in Lake Superior again. Which also means they're not going to spend as much money in the local area because of that experience. And that's the thing that the city doesn't necessarily recognize with all things.
Okay, so we have a list of topics that we'll be looking at over the next year. Yes.
Can I have one more?
Yes.
And I may be speaking with lots of ignorance on this subject, I'm sure I am. But from having taught at WITC, I've had lots of students who have been incarcerated or were out in the juvenile. And, a sentence of 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 180 days, some ways, okay, maybe that doesn't seem so long. But one of the things that was really clear to me is the longer they were incarcerated, the more it adversely affected their housing, their employment, any kind of financial resources, their families, etc. And so I don't understand. My understanding is, to some extent, the sheriff has some latitude on how long people stay incarcerated. I don't know if that's true or not. But my understanding is there's some latitude there. So let's say someone gets a 60-day sentence, and the sheriff has some latitude to determine if they serve the full 60 days or something. But I don't know if that's accurate or what the guidelines are. But it seems to me that if there's any way that we could reduce the amount of time that we incarcerate people, either in some cases from 0 or something less that's still allowable under the sentences that are given, and then use those resources that are saved to try to help those people, their family, their support network get back on their feet and be successful. Because, you know, if I have a student that has a 6-month sentence, good luck in getting back on their feet anytime soon. Part of the reason for that is a lot of employers in the region simply will not look at someone with anything other than the traffic tickets or something like that. And so it's really hard to get good employment after you've got something on your record other than the traffic speeding or something like that. I think the cost to society and to that person and their family and support network are far higher than people realize. And the only reason I know a lot of that impact is I'll have students in this class and, you know, I retired last year, and I'll say, gee, you know, why, you know, expecting to see you here on Wednesday. And then you start hearing all those stories. And then you start realizing, man, this person's trying to get on their feet, but this is now getting really hard. And even if they do get through school, well, then they, you know, job hunting is hard. You run into the grocery store and say, yeah, what's going? And I could name employers that won't even interview them. I won't do that. But I know it's really hard for them to get good employment even when they get the skills, the degree, and stay on the straight and narrow. So if there's anything that we can do to reduce the time people are spending incarcerated, use those same resources to try to get them back on the straight and narrow and support them, I think we benefit in far more ways than most people appreciate. Oh, I'm sure those who are incarcerated understand the feeling of it. But I don't think most many people realize the ripple effect of that in society.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, under that umbrella of law enforcement, I look at that as offender reentry, you know, programming. So that we have systems in place that help them re-enter society and find jobs, find work. The other thing, without getting too far into your law enforcement umbrella, the other thing about that is while they're in jail, the jail could be offering certification programs and other things that they could gainfully and proactively partake in, so that when you talk about offender reentry, they have actually something tangible to take away from their experience. And, you know, the other issue that we've talked about in harm reduction and drugs is that it's sad to say, but the local county jail is becoming that place where families pray their addicted relative will sober up and see the light. And so then begs the question, what are we doing within that jail to support addicts and to promote, you know, healing while they're there? Is it just the punitive, slam the bar shut, feed them 3 squares, and that's it? Here's your release. Can we do better? You know, and that question, can we do better? What would that look like? And so we were looking at what other jail systems were applying. I know down in Sawyer, Vilas County, they had a leadership development program for incarcerated women, and you know, and they were launching it, and there were women breaking through in that. So
Yeah, we do have, I don't know if you're aware of it, Pat, we do have a drug court. And so we basically have people go through, we're actually having a graduation on Wednesday. We're mowing the lawn today, so we're hoping it's nice on Wednesday. We're gonna have the graduation ceremony out front on Wednesday, and she'll be presented with an eagle feather. You know, so, in addition, we have a coordinator, criminal justice coordinator, which basically deals with diversionary tactics. So what type of issues can we deal with from a policy perspective to divert people from jail? And how does that help to keep inmate population down? Because obviously nobody's life goes positive when you go to jail.
One person is transported right now, if I'm not mistaken, that the county may need to pick up the cost to keep that going forward or something.
No, I hired her actually. I interviewed her and hired her in, I don't know, March or sometime during COVID. Because I remember she didn't even come to the office for a while. She'd worked remotely, but she's working closely with Bayfield County. Barb Flynn, I believe is her name, and Abby is our lady. So yeah, so those are things that we're working on. But those issues I think would be very relevant to bring those people in
Yeah.
to educate, to say, here's where you are, because I would hope that you four would be the conduit if citizens have an issue. They're gonna come talking to Jay and say, Jay, there's a problem here, and you're the one that's gonna bring it to the committee. Before we go further, Ron, do you have anything that you'd like to add to future agendas for the next year?
Not at this time.
Okay, thank you. Frequency of meetings. Other groups that have had these types of gatherings, they've been meeting on a quarterly basis. If we did that, it would put us quarterly basis would be November 24th, right? September, October, November? Yeah.
When's Thanksgiving night?
So Thanksgiving is the 26th, so that week is getting, that week might be tough to get people. Maybe we should, how about the 17th is a Tuesday? 17th of November? Does that work for people?
Well, I think so, but I got a dentist appointment.
Sounds good to me.
Okay,
I got a dentist appointment somewhere around there that I have to.
okay.
Well, actually, November 17th.
All right, why don't we pencil in 17th at 9 o'clock? And then what I'll do is I'll work with Chairman Wiggins for the agenda to get, who do we want to come in and speak about these issues that you have brought up? Because you like to say, we don't want to recreate the wheel. If there's already a group doing this, we want to make sure that the comments are directed towards that group. And or if you want to make recommendations to that, that would be probably the way we want to go with these things. So we can slowly knock through these things over there as we work through them. And Chairman Wiggins and I will have to coordinate as far as, what's the priority here. Because I don't have to all these issues by November. So. Okay?
All right, is there a motion to adjourn? Yep, I'll motion to adjourn. All right, motion by Jay.
I'll second it.
Second by Pat, all in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, full abstentions, motion carries.